Hey guys, for today's topic, I'm looking at the question, to what extent did World War One create World War Two? The end of World War One brought along poor social and economic conditions along with the Great Depression, which pushed people to supporting radicals within politics. Millions had died and it had created an environment that enabled social change. Germany during the interwar period was subject to the Treaty of Versailles, which was certainly not kind to Germany as it was very narrow-sighted. The treaty gave Germany massive war reparations, similar to those Germany imposed on France after the Franco-Prussian War, and they had to agree to a war guilt clause as well as giving back Alsace-Lorraine to France and having issues and losses in their military and territory. France and Belgium were very anti-German as the war destroyed their territory, as well as causing massive population losses, while the USA and Britain were more lenient to Germany, as the UK wanted to trade and the US wanted to avoid another European war that could draw them in. Germany also had an unpopular democratic government imposed. The Entente requested reparations in goods or non-German currency, as German currency was not stable. This destabilized the German currency further and caused hyperinflation in 1923 as more money was printed. Germany defaulted on reparations, so French and Belgian military forces occupied the Ruhr Valley in early 1923 to get their reparations in produced goods. This led to a reduction in German industry, putting more stress on Germany's ability to pay the reparations, as well as Ruhr workers refusing to work for the occupiers, so tensions increased and there were clashes with civilians, with 130 locals being killed. The Dawes Plan in 1924 was a series of American loans to help the Weimar government economically, and the London Conference led to the Allied withdrawal from the Ruhr in 1925. The Great Depression in late 1929 made a bad situation worse, and by early 1930, over 2 million Germans were unemployed, and by 1933, 6.1 million, which is roughly 1 in 3 working-age Germans. Many unemployed ex-soldiers who had right-wing sympathies became members of the SA, or the Brown Shirts. These paramilitaries used intimidation tactics, especially in the upcoming elections. By the time of the Reichstag fire in February 1933, Hitler had been Chancellor for 4 weeks and blamed the fire on the communists. The Reichstag fire decree suspended most civil liberties in Germany, enabling a dictatorship, and the last opposition to the NSDAP, the communists, were arrested and communism came to an end in Germany, at least for now. There are many outcomes for Germany from the Treaty of Versailles, including an anti-Allied sentiment, particularly with the French, due to the harshness of the treaty, as well as the Ruhr occupation. The NSDAP promoted themselves easily on this sentiment, making it easier for average people to support them, and the failure of the democratic government through ineffective politicians and economic crises, such as hyperinflation and the Depression, meant people looked towards radical parties. The Reichstag fire meant an excuse for the NSDAP to get rid of the communist opposition, as well as suspending civil rights, so solidifying their rule. As the election was in the March of 1933, the NSDAP would be popular and, through coalition, were voted in. Essentially, World War I put Germany in such a condition that the NSDAP could take power and create World War II. Italy was on the winning side of World War I, but had nearly 2 million casualties and got very little from the resulting peace deal, as they received far less territory than what they wanted, as they wanted the whole Dalmatian coast and Fiume. The Treaty of London in 1915 was the Allied successful attempt to get Italy into the war on their side, and promised Italy Istria, Dalmatia and Tyrol from Austria-Hungary at the end of the war. Involved in the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye in 1919, essentially the Treaty of Versailles equivalent for Austria-Hungary, Woodrow Wilson didn't want to give Italy extensive territory as, militarily, Italy did not have much of an impact on the wider war, so Wilson didn't think that the Italian claim to the land was real, as it was based on national self-determination. Anti-Allied sentiment was high, plus a want for Italian territory created a high amount of support for the Italian Fascist Party, led by Mussolini. Mussolini was a socialist, but at the outbreak of World War I, socialists were anti-war, while Mussolini was pro-war, as he thought it would bring about the social landscape needed for socialist revolutions. He saw how all classes and political ideologies fought for their country during the war, and decided that instead of class being a unifying factor in Mussolini's ideology, nationalism should be, hence the creation of National Socialism, i.e. fascism. There was high inflation and unemployment in 1918, as well as an unpopular government, and this led to people joining the paramilitary, the Squadristi, aka the Black Shirts. Mussolini plus 30,000 fascists did a march on Rome in October 1922, where the fascists took power. However, King Victor Emmanuel III would remain as a figurehead without any real power. The lack of land due to the conditions of the peace treaties at the end of World War I created a nationalist sentiment as well as a want for rightful Italian land. Economic crises plus poor government led to people looking towards the right wing. In an honourable mention, Japan was on the Allied side during World War I and fought the Germans in the Pacific. They mainly fought the German Navy, but also occupied many German colonies in the Pacific, and Japan gained these colonies in the North Pacific, as well as German land in China. So Japan was now a regional superpower with a base to build on for expansion, which would come in the late 1930s. As many historians feel that the Japanese invasion of China was the start of World War II, Japan's strengthened position from World War I gave the Japanese a significant boost to their power in the region. Now, on to Eastern Europe. The fall of Austria-Hungary created a power vacuum, which Germany filled in and became the superpower in the region. The smaller states of Eastern Europe were more vulnerable to foreign influence by major powers, as in 1941 Germany had troops in Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria to attack Yugoslavia, as well as the Anschluss of Austria before World War II. Countries such as Romania, who bordered the USSR, had strong anti-Soviet and anti-communist sentiments. As the USSR was a threat, communism became associated with chaos and civil war, which, as the Russian Civil War was the example to the world of communism in practice, this led to many anti-communist movements, which, in countries where democratic or centralist governments, being unable to be effective, could appeal to right-wing uprisings. Now, on to the Allies, the winners of World War I. Britain doesn't want another world war, and this causes disarmament. However, they become scared of Germany as a threat to the balance of power. Additionally, Britain wants its colonies protected against Italy and needs to repay debts to the USA from World War I. Like Britain, France doesn't want another world war and was also hit hard by the Depression as well as needing to pay back debt to the USA, which leads to the occupation of the Ruhr. The overall want to avoid another world war may have been a factor in disarmament and in the appeasement policy that led to Germany occupying Austria and Czechoslovakia before war was declared. It's arguable that Germany was appeased because the Allies weren't ready for a full war, as they weren't mobilised enough, so there was no point in declaring a war when you could get beat. Arguably, by the time they did declare war, they still weren't ready, hence the Battle of France going so badly for the Allies. What does this all mean? Well, World War I created poor social and economic conditions that, along with the Great Depression, pushed people to support radicals of politics, with the communism proving unpopular to many due to the harsh consequences that came with the Russian Civil War. The popularity of fascism had people turning heads to support such politics. World War I created specific nationalist movements with specific aims, for example in Italy and Germany, and with factors such as the Treaty of Versailles adding to already prominent pressures on centralist governments, fascism rose to prominence and World War II followed. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.